So it is no secret that America is a heavily flawed country. And for all of its flaws, I believe that two of the flaws are the most prominent and underpin all of its other flaws. And those two flaws are, for starters, the vast majority of Americans are simply unfamiliar with the rest of the world. They have no real reference point against which to measure the USA. And in this video right here, we discovered the main reason why that's the case. However, America also has a much bigger flaw, which is the fact that a lot of Americans associate a lack of familiarity with danger. Now, is it true that this is just human nature to some extent? Absolutely. Absolutely. The vast majority of people do associate lack of familiarity with danger. The problem is that Americans don't try to close that gap between what's familiar and what's not. In other words, Americans seem to lack curiosity about the rest of the world, and this creates situations like this one right here, where Justin Banks is being told that Europe is dangerous, when in all actuality, Europe is statistically and anecdotally much safer to be in than the US. Bearing that in mind, I haven't seen this video yet because of course we're going to react to it together, but I suspect that I am going to resonate very heavily with the things he's going to talk about in this video, because I know what it's like to get those sideways glances and have people ask you a million questions a minute when you declare your intent to go overseas. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this reaction.
They told us not to go, that Europe was dangerous, full of pickpockets, terrorists, and unfiltered tap water. So I went anyway.
That's kind of crazy. Unfiltered tap water. The tap water in the countries that I went to, specifically the Netherlands, is much cleaner than the tap water in the US. Maybe the Netherlands is an anomaly even amongst Europe, but I never really drank the tap water in the US, and drinking the tap water in the Netherlands is so common and so acceptable that I don't know that I ever saw a conventional water fountain in my 14 months there. That's a crazy reason to tell someone to not travel overseas.
And guess what? I survived. Shocking. I know. If you ever tried to go on a school trip to Europe from the US, you probably know they load you up with fear. Don't drink the water, never walk alone, hide your money in your shoe, or better yet, just stay home. It's like the second you land in France, someone's gonna slip a blindfold on you. Thing. American culture is obsessed with danger, especially foreign danger. We grew up on this stranger danger, lockdown drills, and news that makes Europe sound like it's a war zone. Movies, TV shows, every time you see a protest, it's like Europe is on fire.
So I just had a bit of an epiphany. I think maybe a lot of this may not even be a result of the lack of familiarity. Maybe a lot of this fear of the unknown is actually just America and Americans, by extension, projecting. Because you got to think about it. If we grow up with lockdown drills and hearing about stranger danger, these are realities of growing up in America, by the way. Seeing security guards at your school having to wear student IDs, otherwise you have to go to in-school suspension or pay a fine, whatever. Yes, that's a real thing as well. I think that because Americans are conditioned to deal with danger in America, which is the place that they're most familiar with, they just subconsciously assume that everywhere else must be even worse, because we're also told growing up that America is the land of the free, the home of the brave, and the best place to be for pretty much the majority of people on the planet, which I've come to realize, and I'm sure he's come to realize, is simply not true. So I'm starting to think that that might be the reason why. It's just that projecting.
Even teachers sometimes pass it on without even realizing they're just repeating the same crap that they were taught. That the U.S. is the safest, freshest, most exceptional place in the world. And everything else, you should be suspicious.
And I promise I'm not going to keep pausing the video, but I just thought of a really great example to exemplify that juxtaposition I was just referring to of believing America is dangerous, but also the best country on the planet. In school, in the same day, you can say the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag and then have a lockdown drill. If that doesn't represent American society, I don't know what does.
Let's be honest. You know if that's scarier than a train ride in Germany? Some of those lockdown drills we had in case someone might attack the school.
Yep.
That was kind of tricky, right? Here's what actually happened in Europe so far. I took a public train ride. I didn't get stabbed. I drank the tap water. I didn't die or get any other form of sickness. I'm fine. I walked around at night, and be honest with you, walking around at night in Germany is sometimes a lot safer than walking around in the daytime in a city like Detroit or Los Angeles if you go down certain neighborhoods.
Absolutely. And that was actually one of my biggest culture shocks when I went to Europe for the first time was I remember, so I'm just going to get into a quick little anecdote right here, but when I arrived in Spain, my girlfriend agreed to meet me at the hotel. Now I got to Spain after dark, and I want to say I got to the hotel at around midnight. And by this point, I think she was already done with her internship work for the day. So I told her which hotel it was, and she had to go to the hotel alone because I didn't know how to navigate that city. I don't know anything about Valencia, Spain. Literally hadn't heard of it up until a couple months prior when my girlfriend decided to do her internship there. So I'm really, really concerned because not only am I nervous to meet my girlfriend for the first time in person, but also because I don't really feel comfortable with her walking alone at night. And it wasn't until the next day when we walked around the city at night together that I realized there was never any reason for concern whatsoever, because I felt safer walking at night in Valencia, to his point, than I did driving in the daytime in some places in LA. Just goes to show you, again, smoke and mirrors. America is the land of illusions.
I have not came across a street yet in Germany where I feel like, I need to get away from here. I need to run fast. Or seen someone walk around with a big, thick jacket, even though it's summertime, and you wonder, why is he wearing these type of clothes even it's hot? And that was in California. But I have yet to really see that in Germany. Maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, but so far, I have. Now, what I did see, the people were nice, the people were chill, sometimes a little bit rude, but so far as dangerous, bad experiences, I've yet to find any. Now,
So I'm not going to invalidate his experience. I don't know what it's like in Germany because I haven't been, but I do think a lot of Americans, they go to Europe and they think that they're being treated rudely when in all actuality, Europeans just tend to be more reserved, especially Europeans from the colder climate countries like the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Germany, etc. But again, I don't know what he actually experienced out there, but that's just a big cultural discrepancy that I've observed coming from the US.
here's the scary part that no one would ever want to say out loud. They're not just scared of people going to Europe as being dangerous. They're afraid of people learning too much as well. Sounds a bit dramatic, right? But think about it. The same people that tell you don't go to Europe, you might get attacked in Europe, are often the same people that say don't go to college. It's too liberal. They'll brainwash you. You'll come back hating America. They're going to teach you all these liberal ideologies and you're just not safe. Now, I'm not advocating for everyone to go to university.
That's kind of interesting. Maybe it's because my family tends to lean pretty far to the left. I'd never heard that sentiment before. I never heard that sentiment personally growing up in Texas. I don't know where he's from, but it's also not hard to imagine that some people think like that. And I say that as someone who dropped out of college, not for those reasons. But the fact that there are people out there who think like that, don't go to college because you're going to learn too much about the world. That's kind of crazy.
Because it's kind of expensive. That's for another story. But the point I'm getting at is that how they try to use fear and tell you that the universities are too liberal. But the truth is, I don't think universities do brainwash the kids. What I find to be true is just that universities normally open your eyes up to a lot more experiences that you did not have when you lived in that small town of just 200 people. It just gives you, for the first time, your first taste of freedom. And for a lot of kids, they don't know how to handle it. Now, let me just tell you a side story. I had a girl come up to me when I was in university. This was in 2005, but I think it still happens. She came up to me and she had a conversation with me. She was nice and she said, Justin, you know what? You're the first black person I had a conversation with. And I looked at her like, huh, really? And I kind of smiled, didn't want to throw her off. I'm thinking, how old are you? And you never actually had a conversation with a black person?
Wow.
Huh, that threw me off a little bit. But the truth is that most of these people have been giving fear lessons their whole lives and they just pass it on. That's why I think a lot of time cops are also afraid of black people in America. It's because, well, there are some bad parts of the area, but a lot of
So hold on real quick. That's kind of crazy. I don't think I've ever encountered anyone like that either. Granted, of course, again, I dropped out of college, so it's fair to assume that if you go to any state university in a conservative state, you're probably going to run across people like that. But that's really, really fascinating to me that someone can make it to college age without ever having a single conversation with a black person. That is actually equally baffling and sad, especially nowadays because we have the internet. I guess back then you didn't really have the same degree of accessibility, but that's pretty wild. And again, that just goes to show that Americans oftentimes aren't even trying to close that gap and turn the unfamiliar into the familiar.
time it's just what they've been taught. You've been taught to be afraid of someone different. And once you go to university, a lot of times, that's when these children have their first open eye experience. It's someone like the Amish in America, right? They have this, they live in these small communities, no technology, no electricity, and then they're given that 1 year to go out into the world and have their experiences. And some of the kids just go crazy. They go wild. You see, you hear stories about it. Some of them still do return back home to their old Amish life, but then there's others like, once I have my eyes open, I can never go back. And that's what it is in university a lot of
A mind that's been stretched can never return to its original dimensions.
times, that these children that have been sheltered, that have been put fear upon them, the fear mongers have had control over them. Once they get their eyes opened up by going to universities or going to another part of the world and start to realize, wow, it's really like that. I can't believe it. When a kid from a small town, small insulated town, suddenly meets people from another country, from another world, they're learns world history, started traveling abroad, it breaks the spell. And then they start asking questions like, wait, if they lied about Europe, what else have they been lying about? Why do we pay so much for health care? Why are universities so expensive? Why was I told this version of history?
You know what? The more I think about it, the more I realize, and I'm going to sound like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, but I honestly don't care. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of Americans don't really have extensive paid vacations. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that the people in charge, and again, I know I sound like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, I apologize, but I don't think those people really want Americans to know that there is better out there. Because I feel like most people that I know from America who have been to Europe, they had that moment of awakening. If you've ever watched The Matrix, when Neo, I don't want to spoil the movie, but it came out in the 90s. So if you haven't watched it by now, then hey, that's on you. But when Neo takes the red pill and his whole reality, his whole perception of reality completely shifts. It's like they lift the curtain and he sees the world for what it actually is. That is exactly what it feels like to leave the US and go to Europe for the first time, or even Asia, Africa, South America, etc. Because you realize that, look, none of these places are perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect place on the planet because people aren't perfect. but there are more efficient ways of operating as a society than America has come to know as familiar.
And that curiosity that opens, it scares people. It scares people who have built up this fear of control their whole life because they don't know the answer to these questions. And same thing when I talk to Americans back home after they say, you've been brainwashed. You don't know what you're talking about. Ah, here you are starting up this European socialism crowd. This is what they tell me. I'm like, God.
Again, I don't know where he's from. No one's ever talked to me like that about my thoughts on Europe, at least not in person. But it's kind of crazy that people could say he's been brainwashed when he actually went there and they didn't. I don't know. It's just that sort of dialogue blows my mind.
As you know me, you grew up with me. I'm not just trying to tell you some crap. I'm trying to tell you something. Just listen. But they already have in their head that I'm a snake charmer. I'm trying to tell them some bull crap. I'm trying to sell ice to a penguin.
Bro, I'm not gonna lie. If you're watching this video, man, you gotta edit those parts out. This is just me trying to give you advice for YouTube. Video is great, but you gotta edit those parts out, bro.
See, once that bubble pops, you can't go open. Once you have opened up Pandora's box, you cannot close it again. And that scares a lot of people. Now, I can't put on the parents. A lot of times the parents are just,
You know what I also think it is? I think maybe it's also that people aren't necessarily afraid of the unfamiliar outside of themselves. They're afraid of the parts of themselves they're going to find whenever they explore that uncharted territory, because they understand subconsciously that in discovering that new part of themselves, they have to leave the old part of themselves that's no longer compatible with that new part of themselves, that new software, so to speak, behind. And people are generally operating from a standpoint of self-preservation, even if the self is deeply flawed and limiting.
just doing what helped them get by. A lot of times it's fear and scare techniques that normally keep people safe. At the end of the day, a lot of times we just want to keep people safe. But there are the other people that really just want you to think that America is the best country in the world, which, hey, I'm a proud American as well. But it's not perfect. Just like Europe is not perfect. The goal is that we can learn from each other and get the best from each world. But if we keep preventing people from experiencing or tasting something else, how can they truly know if they love what they're really experiencing? Hey, I know a lot of people that have gone to Europe, came to visit Europe, and realized, man, America is the best country they ever lived in. They just didn't like Europe. But I know other people that came to Europe and realized, oh, there are some good things. Or went to China.
And you know what? For those people, even though I vehemently disagree with them, I respect the fact that they formulated their opinion on the basis of actual experience, going in the field and experiencing what it's like to be in Europe and comparing their own personal experience in those different places.
And realize, oh, wow, China technology unbelievable. I mean, look at the CEO of Ford. CEO of Ford Motor Company. Ford is American-made cars, right? And I believe I read a story where the CEO of Ford was driving around in a Chinese-made car. And every time he has an interview and I read a story, he's always bragging about how far advanced the Chinese cars are. I mean, he can't stop talking about it. And he is in charge of another car company and talking about other cars. That's crazy. See, it's everybody. Once you get your mind exposed to something and you can realize, wow, that's actually really good. We got to catch up. We are being held back. And sometimes that happens. I'm not saying Europe is perfect. No, not at all. But when American schools act like the rest of the world is just a piece of, then I have to talk about that. That's not an education. That's indoctrination. I can't even say it. That is not education. That is indoctrination, right?
There you go.
And maybe the real reason that they don't want us to travel to Europe or thinking for ourselves is because once you do, you start to see how small your world really is or really was. So you go, study abroad, eat strange food, take a train ride, try these experiences. I can only recommend it. And truly, truly, once you have done those things,
Here's the thing, too. What I've realized, I travel differently than a lot of people. A lot of people, when they go to a place like, let's say, Thailand, where I'm filming this video right now, they want to do things that you can only do in Thailand. And when they go to the Netherlands, they want to do things you can only do in the Netherlands. They want to get in the boat on the canal, or they want to, I don't know, just do traditional Dutch things. I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things, but for me, I don't even do those things more often than not. I literally take my same routine, which is just filming videos, working out, going to the grocery store, regular people stuff. I take my same exact routine and simply move it to wherever I'm at. So my routine here in Thailand is the exact same, more or less, than it was in the Netherlands. And that's how I'm able to measure the quality of life, at least for me personally, in these different countries. Is because I can look at the ease of my routine in each individual place and say, okay, in the Netherlands, going to the gym is much simpler, much easier because I can ride my bike there. Going to the grocery store, I can ride my bike there. It's a lot closer. Here in Thailand, you have all of these convenience stores that are 24 hours. That's interesting. And they're within walking distance. And so all of these little things add up. And those are what inform your perception of your day-to-day experience. So I think if you're watching this and you are maybe a bit overwhelmed by the idea of going overseas, don't even make it into something it doesn't have to be. Just take your same routine that you do right now and go overseas and do the same stuff. And you will notice a very pronounced difference in how you go about completing each activity.
then you can either find out, you know what, my country's not the best. We need to get it better. Or you might even realize that, you know what they told me was 100% right. I love America, but you will never know until you try. And,
Yep,
and, and my goal is, I just want you to try it.
exactly. Exactly. That's my goal too, is to get you on a plane to go see somewhere that is different from where you are right now.
Because here's the thing, the world is not as scary as they told you. Well, but here's the thing, the world is not as scary as they told you. Being afraid to do something, that's scary. And that's with anything. What are you afraid of computers? Try it out. If you're afraid to drive, try. We have to get over our fears. If anything this video is going to teach me is just a PSA. Don't let fear stop you from trying something new. Don't. Try it out. You might find that you might love it. You're probably holding yourself back from a lot of great experiences. And like I said, I'm not saying your parents tried to do you wrong. Your parents try, and they try to protect us from everything. But sometimes parents can also be the ones that are actually holding us back from their own fears. They're putting their fears on the children. And then the children turn around and put their fears on their children and on their children. And it's you're trying to keep your people safe, but there are times when your fears can actually hold someone else back.
Generational fear is definitely a real thing. But just like with generational poverty, it only takes one person to shift the trajectory of that whole entire lineage. And that one person can be you. And that one person only has to make one decision.
I love America. I would never stop loving America. But there's some things that I think America can do better. I love Europe. I have grown to love Europe as much as I love America. But I realize there's some things I wish Europe would do like America. But this education part of just causing people to have to be afraid of stuff, that's not it.
I'd love to hear more about what in particular he wishes Europe, or European countries that is, would implement from America. Because contrary to popular belief, I actually love America as well. And that's why I make these videos. I make these videos being so hard on America because I know the potential of that country. It's just I'm sitting here watching America self-destruct. And it's like I'm screaming, I'm saying, hey, do this. This works. I see it. I see it over here. But I'm screaming and no sound is coming out. So I just hope that eventually people will begin to heed not just my advice, my warnings, but people like his as well, and all these other people. And some of the higher ups in America will actually begin to do things that are beneficial for the people that live there.
If you please, if you have any interesting stories that fit this storyline, please tag a friend that you think is afraid, that needs to travel. Comment on some weird things that you've probably been told by your family, friends, or even in school. I'm in with this story. I remember my textbook, and I think it was fifth grade. I remember this story vivid. And I remember he had the section of socialism and communism was basically the same chapter. And I vividly remember seeing a store, I think in the Soviet Union, I don't know which part, but it's part of the Soviet Union, and it showed long lines. And it showed how destitute that living in the communism world was. And at the time, maybe the book didn't try to, but I feel like it did now, because they put communism and socialism in the same chapter, in the same lesson. It was hard for me at this age to really divide the two. And I don't think it's just me. I think a lot of times when you look at, when people start talking about socialistic ideals, you say socialism, then someone else is going to say communism. And they put these words together. So it wasn't just me that fell for that hokey doke. A lot of people have. And that goes with that. Now, I'm just repeating this because that was in my fifth grade textbook. And I know how the history books are constantly being changed. Things are being taken out. Things are being held off. America somehow is always the greatest in every form. And when we did do wrong, we found a way to justify the reasoning behind it. That's a whole nother video. But Germany and Europe, for the most part, don't do it like that.
So I have somewhat of a similar story. I think I might have even told the story in a recent video, but just in case I didn't. Growing up, until probably third or fourth grade, so around 9 or 10 years old, I actually thought that Asia and Europe were separate because the maps that we had in our social studies classrooms had the US, well, really North and South America, in the center of the map. Europe and Africa on the right side, and then Asia on the left side. So until I actually saw a globe and took the time to look at the globe, I never realized that Asia and Europe were connected. Literally did not know that. So there are a lot of very subtle things that they do, and I don't know if it's by intention, again, tinfoil hat, or if it's just based on ignorance, but there are a lot of things that the US does to make people ignorant. And look, I know that the vast majority of my viewership is actually from Europe, so if you're European, I have a different question for you. If there was ever a point when you saw the US as a desirable place to be, if there was ever a point in your life where you held it in a favorable regard, what was the turning point for you? Was it a visit that you took? Was it a video you watched? What was the turning point where you realized that America is not all that it's cracked up to be?